I've got a couple of questions about reflections on your career and what is kind of one of the most memorable moments or something that you're most proud of.
I did a movie with Francis Coppola, Bram Stoker's Dracula, and it was probably the most crafted movie I was ever part of. Uh, all but 2 days of that movie was shot indoors on stage, on sets. We had this whole shadow thing that we were playing with. And Francis didn't want to use any modern filmmaking techniques. He wanted things to be scrims and smoke and mirrors and kind of old fashioned techniques. That was a big point of what he wanted to do. And I mean, we do things like light a set and photograph the set with a huge format camera and then remove the wall, put in a scrim, and then project the set on the back of the wall. So you could have a guy doing shadows, and it's not perfect, right? It's humans, right? So it's not perfect. But we had another person being the shadow of Dracula on the wall, with Gary in the foreground, and it was stuff like that. And that was really fun. It was, like I said, very, very crafted. But we had one shot that it was one of those things, and Francis was just great to work with. And there was a scene, I have the whole movie, every frame of the film on storyboard. It's in 2 big volume books. And it was called The Score. And at the beginning of the movie, Francis would say, if it's not in the score, it's not in the movie. And we would follow it exactly. You'd hold up a page and go, okay, yeah, this is the angle. And we ended up abandoning that because Francis thought it became a little too restricting. But I have these things, this whole film. But there was a scene as described was Harkin, who's Keanu Reeves, was standing in the middle of this dark forest, and this coach, this caliche, comes up out of the mist, and is Dracula driving. You don't know it's Dracula, but the coachman, and he stops and he reaches out and he lifts Harkin up and puts him in the coach, right? So everybody says, okay, well, he's on a coach. He's 7 feet off the ground. Harkin's down there. It's magic, right? He reaches out and levitates him and some stuff like that. Okay, so that's what we had planned. And the special effects guy had this parallelogram teeter-totter that Harkin would stand on. And they expected Dracula to, wave magic fingers and Harkin would fly up and they were going to kind of levitate him into the coach. And so Francis comes in and they got it all set up and we look at it and we show him the shot and he goes, no, that's not what I want. No, I want his arm to stretch. I want him to be like Rubber Man. And everybody went, Rubber Man? It's like, who's got the big rubber arm? I mean, this is one of those completely caught off guard because no one had kind of drilled in on what Francis expected. They just read it and assumed it was this. Francis assumed we all understood he wanted the arm to stretch. And so we had nothing. I mean, there's no rubber arm. There was no nothing. And all we had was this teeter-totter that the visual effects guys had come up with, or the physical effects guys had come up with. And so we're all sitting there kind of scratching our heads going, what are we going to do? And I turned to Michael. I said, do we have to actually see his arm stretch, or we just have to see his hand go all the way to Harkin? And he goes, I don't know. What do you think? I said, what if we start wide and zoom in on his hand as his hand reaches out? And you can go and look at the scene. And we just follow the hand all the way to Harkin's collar and pick him up and then zoom back out. Because when you start at the beginning, they're 8 feet apart. There's no way an arm's going to reach there. And so what we ended up doing is off the right side of the coach, we built a scaffold that had the dolly on it. And we put a huge, long diving board on the dolly and cut the seat out of the coach and put it on the diving board. And so all was Gary, all he had to do was sit there. And as his arm reached out, we just kind of pushed him sideways and moved his arm to hearken. And he
Wow.
grabbed him and then pulled it back. And it took like an hour and a half. It was like really fast. We just put it together. And Francis comes in, he's looking at all this. I think he wanted the day off. I think he threw the rubber arm thing at us, figuring, well, okay, this day's done, right? And so he came in, he's looking, and Michael says, don't watch what's happening, just watch the shot. And so he's looking at the monitor, and we do the shot for him, and Francis goes, can I swear here? Because this is what he said. He goes, that's fucking weird, man. I love it. That's weird. And that was the shot. And Michael, as I explained it earlier, he was very appreciative of your work. He just said, that was Pat's idea. Pat came up with that. And it was just it was a big, and Francis like shook my hand. He goes, yeah, you got it. And it was like, that was a really big moment for me. Because there's a filmmaker that, I think The Godfather is some of the two finest movies, one and two, the two finest movies made, and to have him, congratulate me on my collaboration, I think was pretty great. That's as good as it gets for our key grip, to have somebody of that stature recognize your input, which is pretty great.
It was a good idea. It was a great idea.
Yeah, it worked, and it worked well. And again, the movie was made in 93 or 94. It's an old film. You look at it now and you go, okay, well, it fits the process the film wanted, and the film wanted an old-fashioned process. Like I said, smoke and mirrors and scrims and reflections, and that's how we made the movie, and that was kind of a big point of the film. So it fit that. There was nothing special there. It wasn't visual effects. It was just camera work. It's fun.